destruction from Hurricane Dorian. Relentless rain, powerful tornadoes, and life-threatening storm surge.
Started shaking real hard, and then the wall just caved in on me.
The monster storm still moving up the Carolina coast.
Get to safety and stay there.
NBC Charlotte's live team coverage tracking Dorian starts right now.
We are continuing to track Hurricane Dorian right now. Welcome to this special edition of NBC Charlotte, a digital edition that is. I'm Fred Shropshire.
And I'm Sarah French. The storm is still a Category 2 hurricane off the Carolina coast right now. Here's a live look at the first warned Doppler radar. You can see Dorian is picking up speed, moving northeast towards Wilmington. Here are live pictures from Myrtle Beach, the storm passing through this area tonight. You can see rain, rough seas, the camera shaking a bit in the wind, dangerous floodwaters through the streets of Charleston today, widespread damage throughout the city there.
We have full team coverage for you as the eye of the storm hits the North Carolina coast.
Chief Meteorologist Brad Panovich is in the First Warned Storm Center with the very latest on Dorian. Brad?
Yeah, we just got the 8 o'clock update, which is an intensity, speed, and direction kind of update. We don't get a track update till 11 o'clock. The winds have come down just a hair. It's sitting at 100 miles per hour. It's moving northeast at 10, and that's pretty key because it's got a northeast direction, and it's moving pretty quickly. Now about 30 miles south of Cape Fear. In fact, it's passing directly over the Frying Pan Tower, and we've been watching that flag out there all afternoon and evening now. It is basically in the eye wall, and we'll likely see it go calm, and then we'll see that flag change directions. Now, where's it going to be heading? Well, eventually it's going to be heading up here just south and east of the Cape Fear area, but then it's going to head towards Cape Lookout as we go up towards the Morehead City area. Now, right now, these were the peak wind gusts in our area. Most of the wind gusts around 30 to 35 miles per hour. But as this moves up the coast, we're going to see that 100-mile-an-hour wind get very close to the coast, especially right here, eastern Carteret County. This is the location where we're likely going to see the strongest winds. And that time frame is during the overnight hours, maybe 3, 4 o'clock in the morning. These times, I think, are a little bit late because the speed of it actually shows it getting here much sooner than 2 o'clock in the morning. So if you're in eastern North Carolina watching, and all our friends at Outer Banks watching right now, your time frame is going to be right around 8 a.m. That's 6, 7, 8 o'clock in the morning time frame. And then it moves off the coast pretty quickly tomorrow morning, and then we'll be long gone by the afternoon. We'll get that first surge of moisture and wave action coming in early tonight. But then tomorrow, remember the backside, we're going to have northwest winds, which is going to bring in that sound side flooding. Closer to Charlotte, we've had some showers in Anson and Richmond counties, but most of that has been to the east. As the storm pulls away, we'll actually see the rain showers head off to the east as well. But right there, that's where I marked. That's where that Frying Pan Tower is. It's about 30-some miles to the southeast of Southport there. The center of the circulation is right there. These bands on the northwest side are hammering Oak Island, Bald Head Island, all those areas right there on Cape Fear. So we're seeing some really strong winds. And remember, the wind is pushing the water up against these beaches. So heading north as you go up towards Wrightsville and Carolina Beach, you're likely seeing the highest storm surge. And if it's coinciding with high tide, that's when you have the biggest flooding. You could see an overwash in some of these locations. That's where we're watching for maybe the possibility of overwash occurring. Up to the north, we've got some tornado warnings. That's been an ongoing issue all day. So many tornadoes reported in eastern North Carolina. That threat for tornadoes will continue ahead into the northeast. So a lot of folks asking me, when is the tornado threat going to diminish? Not really till we see the wind shift. As long as we have that southeast wind and you're ahead of the track of the storm, that's where you're going to see the tornado threat. Back here is where we see the tornado threat go down and the winds start to push offshore. So all that water that was pushed into Myrtle Beach today is now being pushed back out. So you're likely going to see the beach get exposed a lot more as we kind of have a really, really low tide. It's what it's going to look like as the water gets pushed offshore. But there's still heavy rain. You notice the flash flood warnings for many areas right there on the North and South Carolina border. So again, this is where it looks like it's heading. It's going to miss the Cape Fear area. So we're not going to see an official landfall here. I think the next possible landfall location, if it moves a little bit north of east, is going to be up there towards Carteret County. Remember, an official landfall means the center of the circulation, which is the lowest pressure, has to completely cross the coast. It can't just be half of it or the eye wall. It has to be the middle to count as an official landfall. If it just brushes, we sometimes refer to that as an indirect hit, and a landfall as a direct hit. So that's what we're going to be watching tonight, guys, as this heads up to where Richard Devane is up there in eastern Carteret County. That's going to be the spot that probably sees the worst weather during the overnight hours.
All right, thank you, Brad. Well, Dorian heading toward the Outer Banks tonight.
Yeah, NBC Charlotte's Richard Devane live in Morehead City with the very latest. How is it where you are, Richard?
Yeah. Right now, calm, especially listening to what Brad just said a few moments ago about how bad things will get. But right now, we've got some winds. I'm going to let Pierre shoot that tree over there. You'll get an idea of how the winds are whipping against that tree. Not anything of major significance, I should say, as far as the strength of the wind, but we expect it to continue to intensify, especially as Dorian gets closer to this area. Right now, I'm standing on the bridge. This bridge actually leads us all the way to Atlantic Beach. We can tell you that there are police cars here, state troopers as well as local police officers. I'll step out of the way and let Pierre take a shot of that. And what they're doing is just monitoring, making sure folks don't go onto the beach. The beaches have been under a mandatory evacuation since yesterday. We can tell you that there is a curfew also going on in parts of Cataract County right now. It started at 7 o'clock, and of course it will continue until tomorrow morning at sunrise, they say. As far as the preparations all up and down. If you drive up and down Highway 70, which is the main thoroughfare here, it is like a ghost town. You see buildings boarded up. You see cars sitting against front doors of big buildings and offices to keep them secure. We can tell you the marinas have been also evacuated, and a lot of people have moved their big ships or their boats away from the marina into higher places and higher elevations. We have seen a few people out and about. We've seen them on their porches standing out, and we were at Emerald Isle, I should say, just up the Crystal Coast a little bit ago. We did see folks taking a last look as the waves are coming on. But of course, the most important thing that we can tell you is that as the storm gets closer, it's vitally important, according to the governor, to get out of the storm's path. The best bet is to shelter in place if you're deciding to ride it out. Pay very close attention to that, but there is still time for folks to get away. For instance, they can come off of the beach. They can't go back on. That's the same thing in the cities. They're hoping that people will make their trek out and away from this area. We'll be here throughout, and we'll give you updates throughout. But for now, we're right here in Carteret County. This is the Morehead City area. Richard Devane, we're going to send it back to you.
Okay, Richard, thank you, and be safe out there. Turning now to some live pictures from the Frying Pan Tower off the Carolina coast. You can barely see anything out there at this point. As Brad was telling us earlier, the winds have dropped to about 100 miles per hour, and we're seeing the tornado, or the hurricane, I should say, move north at about 10 miles per hour. That frying pan tower actually is about 30 miles south of Cape Fear, which is where this hurricane is moving.
Yeah, we were wondering if that American flag was going to get ripped from the pole. Yeah, we'll see. We'll check it a little bit later. Well, rain and wind picking up in North Carolina are expected to get worse throughout the evening.
NBC Charlotte's Savannah Levins is live in Wilmington this evening. Savannah, how are the conditions where you are right now?
Well, they are definitely picking up, Fred. I just had a gust of wind so strong it just knocked me off this step here. Definitely picking up. You know, we've been kind of watching tornadoes all day. That's been a big issue since this morning. Several reported tornadoes causing a lot of damage. But now you're definitely starting to, as you can probably see right now, see heavy rains, heavy winds. You know, where Richard is, he said that people might still have some time to get out. That's just not the case here in Wilmington. If people were going to get out, they had to have done it by now. The good news is I really think people heeded the warnings. I was saying earlier on the show, this is, I think, my 5th hurricane major storm I've covered, and never have I seen the kind of reaction, I guess, people heeding the warnings from officials. Governor Roy Cooper putting in that mandatory evacuation for the coastal areas a few days ago, and really people seem to have heeded the warning. They closed off the beach. They told everyone to get out. In fact, something else I've never seen in my entire time of covering major storms is law enforcement actually charging people who didn't heed that mandatory evacuation. You know, they are always kind of put in place. But this time around at Wrightsville Beach, not far from here in Wilmington, law enforcement there has criminally charged several people who were walking out on the beach a few hours ago. So they're taking this very seriously, as obviously they should have, because this is inland a little bit in Wilmington, and we're still seeing this. I don't know if Can you see kind of the wind on the trees there? I'm asking my photographer, Stuart. He might not be able to see me or hear me, I should say, from that far away with these strong winds. But you can kind of see just how strong this wind is pulling these trees. Even earlier, before we started feeling these major effects, we were seeing flash flooding. I shot some video earlier. There were roads completely underwater, and that was at like noon this afternoon, well before any of this started coming down. So the other concern, obviously, the fact that it's getting dark right now and we can't see a lot. So hopefully no one's on the roads. Hopefully everyone has heeded the warnings that law enforcement has been drilling into everyone for the past several days. And hopefully everyone's ready to just kind of ride this out. And of course, we're not going to be able to see a lot of the damage until the morning. But definitely keeping all those folks in mind, still keeping an eye on any tornado warnings that may arise. But I think right now the big issue is going to be wind and clearly rainfall, guys.
Yeah, it sounds so windy where you are right now. Savannah, talk about those tornado warnings that you guys were hearing about earlier in the day into the evening.
Yeah, so it was strange. Those were popping up before even really wind or rain picked up at all this morning. Definitely nothing like this, but we were getting a lot of twister sightings. None of them confirmed yet, I don't think. I think that takes a little bit of time, but we did see a lot of damage from them as well. There was one neighborhood near here in Wilmington, Burlington County, that was nearly flattened. People's entire roofs on their homes were taken off, and you look at those images and you're like, oh my God, those people don't have time to make the appropriate preparations for this, what we're feeling right now, the actual impacts of Dorian. So you really feel for those folks who had, a rogue twister go through their neighborhood and tear their roof off before the impacts even came. So I think because of those twisters, it put this area, the North Carolina coast, Wilmington, etc., in a pretty bad position with Dorian approaching.
All right, Savannah, thank you. We'll check in with you a little bit later. Stay safe out there as the storm approaches your area.
Hurricane Dorian trending on Twitter as images and video from the storm flood our news feeds.
NBC Charlotte's Rachel Lundberg has a look at some of those devastating scenes. Unbelievable pictures and video that you have over there, Rachel.
Yeah, I've been scrubbing through social media since 4 o'clock this morning, and my feed just keeps refreshing because so many people are posting videos of what they're seeing in their area along the Carolina coast. We've obviously seen a lot of videos of people spotting what looks like tornadoes. This one, Brad was tagged in Emerald Isle, and you can see a flash of light. It might be the same video from a different angle. This is also in Pender County. It was spotted near one of the local fire stations. And let's just look at the damage in Emerald Isle. So this looks like an RV or trailer park of some sorts, completely just flattened and buildings tossed over. Hopefully nobody was hurt by that. I don't have a report of if anybody was injured there, but hopefully, like Savannah said, that they heeded those evacuation orders. This is also in Emerald Isle as the wind and rain picked up after that possible tornado touched down in that area. It looks like either a trailer there or a car just completely tossed around like these things are weightless. It's crazy. Here's a lot of flooding that we're seeing from Garden City. So this is when high tide coincided with storm surge. You can see, looks like it is definitely up to the top of some of those docks and into areas and streets into the city there of Garden City. And then this crazy fire here that people were on the scene of. Officials and a lot of local stations were reporting about this along the coast as well. That happening in Georgetown. So hopefully our thoughts and prayers are the fact that that family evacuated, but absolutely devastating. It looks like they lost everything from inside of that house. Unfortunately, we talk about this all the time. Turn around, don't drown. And you still see pictures here of people trying to drive through these flooded waters. Definitely not the thing you want to do, and especially now that it's getting dark, like Savannah said, you can't see when a road is flooding, and then it's too late when you're already in it. So that's just a good warning that I wanted to pass along while we're on Facebook Live here. Couldn't decide if this image was real or fake, but this was tweeted out from Dorchester County, South Carolina, a government official Twitter page. So looks like this road is just completely covered in debris. It almost looks like a painting of some sorts, and a crew's obviously trying to clear some of the trees that are blocking a lot of roads. This was posted by a South Carolina sheriff's office saying they used a high water vehicle to push out a downed tree in the North Chase neighborhood entrance. So we're continuing to monitor that. Okay, I want you to see this, so make sure you get in close. This is what happens when a branch hits a power line. Oh my goodness. Boom. Yeah, not anything you want to be close to or mess around with. And then, guys, this has definitely been making the rounds. Who drove their Jeep on the Myrtle Beach shoreline? It's crazy.
Yeah.
Don't know if that Jeep is still there. Definitely, we know that nobody was hurt in this. Nobody is in that Jeep, but it has been the tourist attraction, unfortunately, because you don't want to be out on the beach at this hour, especially earlier today or into the night. But that Jeep was basically becoming a floating device in the ocean. It's been tossed around like crazy and shared thousands of times.
Yeah, the insurance company's not going to be happy to see that. They're probably going to wonder why that happened when that person tries to
Right,
follow it.
and we said earlier, the police said that someone drove it out to see how far they could get and then abandoned the vehicle. So you said earlier, I don't know if that insurance company is going to be covering that, but
Yeah, you might get dropped.
we shall see. Rachel, thank you so much. We'll check in with you in a little bit. So if you're just joining us, we continue to track Dorian tonight as those winds and rain continue to pick up all along the North Carolina coast now.
And here are live pictures from downtown Wilmington. We've been seeing these images all evening long. Some 2,500 full-time residents were forced to evacuate. And as you heard our Savannah Levins reporting, some of those folks who did not heed the warning, who were still around, were charged with a misdemeanor for not evacuating. But that's what it looks like there as the storm passes over that area tonight.
You don't usually hear that in these stories and that we've covered in the past, but let's send it over to Brad Panovich with the latest now on Dorian's track. Obviously, Brad, you said it's starting to really pick up steam here.
Yeah, near the Cape Fear area. Now, locally, our winds have only maxed out about 32 miles an hour today. I wanted to show you quickly, our winds are going to stay kind of breezy tonight. So the wind you're feeling out there tonight across the Charlotte area and the Western Carolinas, it is abnormally breezy, but nothing that's going to be too big of a deal. Most of the wind gusts are only around 20 to 25 miles per hour. We're really close to having that storm make landfall, but it's going to miss the Cape Fear region. What's interesting is these bands on the northwest side look to be an area where we have enhanced winds. So the winds are really hammering areas like Oak Island, Bald Head Island, and that Frying Pan Tower, which everyone, it's just, I'm glued to it. And now that we lost the light of day, it's kind of hard to tell, but we'll have to see if we end up seeing that flag tomorrow. I've been watching the buoy, which is right next to it. It showed 24-foot seas, and the pressure drop was just off the charts. Now, where is this going next? All the folks in Carteret County, Atlantic Beach area, up towards the Outer Banks. So everybody in the Outer Banks watching tonight, hope you're ready, because this is going to come in the wee hours of the morning. You've got the oceanside flooding coming in now. That southeast wind is pushing water into these locations. Now, when things start to get problematic tonight, I don't really think it's going to be the oceanside flooding as much as the sound side flooding. It's just easier to move the sound side water. It's shallower. It's easier to push around. So when the winds swing around to the northeast, it's going to start pushing water into the southern part of the Pamlico Sound, up into the Neuse River. And we're going to see probably some flooding there on that north side of Carteret County. So Havelock, Harkers Island, those areas. And as that gets closer, we'll see the winds swing around to the northwest down here. So we're going to start pushing water offshore. Because there's no sound here to worry about. That water maybe in the coastal waterway gets sloshed around a little bit, but you can see the eye kind of wobbling there. It's going to miss the Cape, so that's another miss of a landfall. That will not be a landfall there. We'll have to see if it makes a landfall. The Outer Banks stick out really, really far, and for that reason, I think that's where we'll see the winds. Now, the winds are going to be a big story as the center gets closer to land. The water's been a big story all day. For more on some of those winds out there, we've seen some big gusts. Let's go over to meteorologist Aisha Scott. And Aisha, we've seen some pretty good gusts along the coast.
Oh, yeah, we've seen some of those winds gusting up into the 60s, almost 70 miles per hour in Charleston, 69 miles per hour, 67 miles per hour in Hilton Head. And then as we work our way a little bit farther to the north, Myrtle Beach, 54 mile per hour wind gusts today, and 43 mile per hour wind gusts in Wilmington. So obviously closer to the coast is where we are seeing the higher wind gusts today, and that is because Dorian is obviously tracking closer to the coast. And Charlotte, the highest wind gusts today, 32 miles per hour. Now, I want to talk about some of the warnings that we do have in effect, because we still have a hurricane warning in effect for pretty much the coastal, so we'll say eastern North Carolina, right along the coast, including the Outer Banks stretching down towards Wilmington, Garden City, even Charleston is now out out of that hurricane warning, but now in that tropical storm warning, and that will probably start to expire sometime soon. A little bit farther inland is where we do have those tropical storm warnings still in effect. Our storm surge warnings have been scaled back, so now they just include pretty much North Carolina and southeastern Virginia. So we're really going to have to watch the storm surge as Dorian continues to move off to the north and east, and again throws all of that water back towards the coast. Here's a look at the system right now. We've got some of the outer rain bands all the way stretching into southeastern Virginia, but some of these brighter shades that you're seeing, the reds and the oranges and the yellows, those are heavier bands of rain. So I was watching some of them because some of these bands of rain putting down rainfall totals, or rainfall rates, I should say, anywhere from 2 to 3 inches per hour, and we're still seeing some of that heavy steady rain pushing through South Carolina as well. But finally, Charleston starting to dry out just a little bit as Dorian moves off to the north and east. In Charlotte, we have been dry for the most part today. The rain across our viewing area has primarily been across the southeastern portion of our viewing area, again with the bulk of the heavy rain being across eastern North Carolina. And Brad, as we go into the rest of even the weekend, but as we end the work week, it's going to stay dry, but also it's going to get pretty toasty around here.
Yeah, and that's good news for a lot of the state, because the folks that are going to be impacted tonight and early tomorrow morning, you're going to have a dry stretch of weather once the storm moves on. Here's kind of the wider view of the system, just to kind of show you how it is literally hugging the coast right now. It's going to miss the Cape Fear. The tip there just barely touching the western eye wall does not count as a landfall. But now our next cape, which is Cape Lookout, is the next cape that could get clipped by this. And then you see how far the Outer Banks stick out. I put the grid lines on here. Those grid lines are the lat and longitude lines. And what happens is, because we stick out, the state of North Carolina, and then the Outer Banks stick out even farther, recurving storms tend to clip us. If we were kind of flat, if the whole East Coast was just flat like that, we probably wouldn't see as many landfalls here in the Carolinas, but we kind of jut out there. And as the storms recurve like this one is, it gives us a couple opportunities for a landfall. And so we're missing one here, but I think tonight will be maybe the first U.S. landfall of this system. Now, the water vapor loop shows that trough digging in behind it. And look at the stream of blue. Those are high and mid-level clouds. That's the moisture being pulled out. So you can see what's influencing it. It is getting pushed that way. It's not going to go back to the northwest. It's probably not going to go to the north. It may pick up more of an easterly component as it moves into the middle of the Atlantic. Now, the waves are huge. We told you about the waves at the Frying Pan Tower, up around 24 feet. Well, here's some verification. Some of these waves in here, 30, 35 feet. And those waves on top of the surge, sometimes we give you those surge numbers, 4 to 8 feet. That doesn't include the waves on top of the surge. So that's when you can really get some destruction. And notice the ocean side here for the Outer Banks. So for folks in the Outer Banks, the waves are going to wash over the island. You're used to having overwash, but this is going to be pretty intense for about a 6 or 7 hour period tomorrow morning. And then the winds will swing around to the northwest. Big waves up towards Cape Cod as well. They're actually under a tropical storm watch as well. And then this moves into Canada. So Nova Scotia, areas of Newfoundland, they're going to get some big time waves and wind out of this as it becomes a big extra tropical low. I talked about how dry it's going to be on the backside tomorrow. That northwest wind will dry out the entire state. So we are going to see lots of sunshine during the day tomorrow, and hot. I mean, we're talking temperatures pushing 90 degrees with low 90s. This time of year, the average highs in the mid 80s. So we should see a cooler pattern, but unfortunately, we're kind of in store for a little heat wave here. And oh, by the way, we're still in the peak of hurricane season. So we've got to watch the entire Atlantic for more storms. Now, rainfall-wise tonight, I don't expect there to be a ton of more rain in South Carolina. It's really eastern North Carolina. Even tomorrow, you see areas out towards the Sounds as you go into eastern North Carolina, kind of in that extreme flash flood threat. And one of the things you always worry about in these setups is if when you get heavy rain inland trying to flow back out of these rivers, and you get surge going into the mouth of the rivers, those two bodies of water meet up, and that causes a lot of backwater flooding. Now, the good news, most of eastern North Carolina hasn't been abnormally wet here in the last couple of months, so the ground can hold some of this. There is some capacity to hold some of this heavy rain, and some of it will just wash off. Look at the view cam tonight. Clear skies out there tonight. It is a beautiful night here in Charlotte. We're lucky on the west side of town. We've got a lot of evacuees here, but talking about those warm temperatures, look at that. Low 90s, so get ready for a little bit of heat. Post-hurricane heat wave here in the western Carolinas. We should be getting an update coming up in about 15 or 20 minutes, guys, and we'll have to see if the wind speeds continue to diminish. But right now, northeast movement, and we're waiting to see if we're going to have a landfall tonight. And I think by the time the football game is over,
Yeah.
we're probably going to know if we're going to have a landfall here in the Carolinas.
All right, Brad, thank you. We have some live pictures tonight. First, we're going to look at Wrightsville Beach. Savannah Levins was there earlier. Of course, all evening long, she's been talking about how they had those mandatory evacuations. And surprisingly to a lot of us, people have been criminally charged who did not heed that warning. They've also seen some tornado warnings in that area as well on Wrightsville Beach.
And another live look now here. This is Myrtle Beach, where you can see that camera is still rocking. We had some a little bit of flooding there as the hurricane crept slowly up the coast, bringing lots of rain bands and heavy winds buffering the beaches there. But we've been watching and keeping a close eye on our coast as that storm moves very closely to our North Carolina coast. NBC Charlotte Richard Devane is live in Morehead City.
Yeah, he joins us now with the very latest. Richard, how is it where you are?
Yeah, we're beginning to get just a little bit more rain. There's some rain here. Last time we spoke, it was absolutely dry out here, but there is some rain. I'm looking at the trees in the distance. We've been looking at this one tree over in the distance. It's actually not moving as much as it did the last time we spoke. I'm standing here on this bridge, which actually leads to Atlantic Beach. I'll step out of the way, and you can see that we'll just shoot up. There's not much to see, which is a good thing. Well, you're looking actually at the bridge, so you can see that there's not a lot going on. That's because this beach has also been had under mandatory evacuations. And I spoke to an officer when we first came out here. He said that there's not a lot of activity on the beach. Of course, there's always people who disregard the warnings, but for the most part, the vast majority of people in and around the beach and also in Morehead City have heeded the warnings, taken precautions, boarded up their homes, taking care of their possessions, and then left for drier, higher ground. As you can see, state troopers out here as well as local police all guarding this area. Now, there is a curfew going on here in this part of Carteret County that started at 7 o'clock. It'll go until sunrise, they say, and of course they can extend it out as many days as necessary. We have not even gotten close to the worst part yet. We're still at that point where we're still waiting to see what's going to happen. We'll be here making sure that to give you updates and everything as the storm gets closer and approaches, but right now it's beginning to pick up. We have had some rain, not as much as we've seen in earlier parts of the day, but we can tell you that right now the situation is, the weather's beginning to deteriorate, but not as much as we would expect at this time. Of course, we heard Brad say it's moving a lot slower than we thought it would be. So we were waiting here for Dorian, and the folks are probably watching our coverage, which is important, and staying someplace safe and someplace dry. That's a story right here from Morehead City. Richard Devane, send it back to you.
Well, Richard, we were talking about the hurricane leading up to the days of this event, but one of the things that catches people off guard but is not out of the ordinary is for these storms to sometimes spawn tornadoes, and we know some folks were caught off guard. What can you tell us about that?
Yes. Yeah, let's talk about that. If you actually were going to Atlantic Beach and then were to hang a right at the end of this bridge, go about 20 miles up, that would take you to Emerald Isle. And that is where a possible tornado touched down earlier today. I mean, it started about 9 o'clock, spoke to a number of people about that. They say that all of a sudden they saw it and they only had time to run and do what they were supposed to, dive into bathtubs and onto the floor. The owner of this RV park said that he actually, with his daughter and his grandchild, went and dived on the floor of his bathroom. A lady who actually said her husband, who's a normally quiet, calm guy, came screaming at her, saying, "Look at this." They looked and they saw what she says was a funnel cloud. She and her husband ran and dived into their bathtub. They were safe. There were no major injuries, but at that place where they live, that RV park, totally, I mean, at least a half, 2 dozen to 3 dozen RVs destroyed. I mean, turned upside down, smashed into cars, debris every place. We actually were there earlier today. We had to leave because we know that as the winds pick up, some of that loose debris can fly around, and that's very dangerous. So we left that area. We can tell you that the good thing was that no one was hurt. That's the way we want to keep things. A lot of those people lived in those homes. They boarded up their homes and they got out of there, which is pretty smart and something they should have done.
I've read that there were between 8 tornadoes reported between Wayne County and New Hanover County, and just seeing the structural damage that you're reporting on, it's amazing that there were no injuries or fatalities reported at this case. Please stay safe out there. Richard, we will join you in a couple of moments, so hang loose. In case you were just now tuning in, we are continuing to track Hurricane Dorian right now. Welcome to this special edition of NBC Charlotte. I'm Fred Shrupshaw.
And I'm Sarah French. So the storm's still a Category 2 hurricane right off the Carolina coast right now. Here's a live look at the first warned Doppler radar. You can see Dorian picking up speed, moving northeast towards Wilmington. Here are live pictures from Myrtle Beach, the storm passing through this area tonight. But you can see the rain, the winds, the rough seas, the camera shaking, already starting to affect that area. Chief Meteorologist Brad Panovich is in the First Warned Storm Center with the very latest on Dorian. Brad.
Yeah, as of 8 o'clock, we're getting these hourly updates now whenever there's land threat or we've got radar coverage. So we get like basically hourly updates on location, speed, and intensity, not so much track, which isn't really changed much for about the last 5 days. It's been pretty consistent. Winds have come down just a hair. We're down to 100-mile-an-hour winds. The movement is key. It's due northeast, and I would say it's a little east of that because we're starting to see it kind of wobble a little bit to the east, and it's missing the Cape Fear region. And you can see this is a 3-hour loop. It is actually moving pretty quickly. We haven't been able to see a speed like this in quite some time. It's been such a slow-moving storm since the Bahamas. It's finally starting to pick up some speed as it gets caught in the westerlies. Now, it's still a forecast here to slam into areas near Cape Lookout and areas of Cape out towards the Outer Banks near Hatteras Island, but it's near Cape Fear right now, and it's very close. It almost made a landfall here. In fact, I'm going to go in close. You can see the eye wall. So the northwest part of the eye wall is kind of touching Bald Head Island. Oak Island's right there. Southport's right there. You ever been there? Nice little fishing town. You can see the strong winds. So the winds are pushing water into this direction. Then they're pushing the water back out this way. The pressure out here is just dropping like a rock. We're looking at the Frying Pan Shoals buoy, and the pressure is way, way down there. And right there is where that buoy is. So it's on the northeast side. And you can see the eye wall kind of wrapping around. Now, sometimes I got a lot of people commenting that it looks like it's dry over here. Remember, radar, there's a lot of lack of radar coverage out over the water because radar only has a limited range, so we're not seeing all the way out there. Here was the updated track. You see it moving northeast tonight into tomorrow morning, making landfall, possibly a couple landfalls in eastern North Carolina. Coming up, we'll talk about some of the impacts overnight and talk about how quickly this is going to move out, because if you can make it through tonight in eastern North Carolina, things are going to improve very quickly on your Friday.
All right, Brad, thank you. Rain and wind picking up in North Carolina and expected to get worse, of course, throughout the evening tonight.
NBC Charlotte Savannah Levins is live in Wilmington this evening. Savannah, how are the conditions right now? What's the latest update?
Fred, you know, the wind and rain has definitely picked up. I'm here with a representative from the Coast Guard, Jeff. Jeff, can you tell me a little bit about kind of the role that the Coast Guard plays in a storm like this?
Sure. The Coast Guard is filling a multifaceted role right now in an incident like this. We regulate the waterways. So in this case, we close the Cape Fear River, and that is to, of course, make sure that no vessels are coming in or out, so that they're obviously safe. We also are standing by for search and rescue operations for when people are in distress. We have aircraft, we have boats on the water that can assist people, and we're also running a incident command post 24 hours a day right now that is acting sort of as a nerve center to manage the Dorian response right now.
And we talked about this. It's very unlikely that someone would be out there right now. Obviously, I imagine a big part of the Coast Guard's job is the preparation beforehand. What kind of things were you doing, getting the word out to close these things out?
It's you're right. Preparation is key to the situation like this. Leading up to the storm, we put out notices to mariners. We put out marine safety information bulletins, and these are broadcast to mariners, and that is sort of in a cascading fashion saying that traffic is going to eventually be stopped on the rivers. Aside from that, pre-staging a lot of assets, a lot of planning, trying to anticipate any possible thing that could go wrong, that could happen, so that when it does, we're able to respond quickly.
We have a lot of people watching all up and down the North Carolina coast who are either in the middle of this or about to get a lot of these effects. Any word that you would give out to those folks?
Hopefully your hurricane plan is in place and it's actionable right now. The time for planning has passed, and so I hope that the public and everybody is somewhere safe with good communication so that they can either talk to family or that they can contact 911 if they're in distress or in an emergency.
Yeah, I was about to say, if anyone finds themselves in an emergency, distress, needs to contact the Coast Guard, how do they best do that?
The best way to do that is 911. What we don't want is people reaching out on social media, updating their Facebook status that they're in trouble, or Googling an agency and trying to contact them directly. By calling 911, they can decide and allocate the right resources and the right agencies that are going to be able to respond the fastest. So I strongly advise everybody to call 911 if you're in distress.
Yeah. Jeff, thank you so much. And of course, again, like Jeff just mentioned, you hope that people have put their plans into place by now and are kind of writing this thing out. I'll check back with you guys in a little bit. But again, right now in Wilmington, just getting those strong rains and heavy winds right now. But I'll send it back to you guys in the studio.
Savannah, thank you. Stay safe out there. Let's get the latest on Hurricane Dorian now with NBC Charlotte's Bill McGinty, who's live in the newsroom for us. Bill?
Yeah, Sarah and Fred, one of the things I've always noticed about hurricane coverage is that, as a younger reporter, when I was sent out to cover a hurricane down in Florida and all points in between, I usually ended up on tornado damage because, and we saw it today, so many of these feeder bands that swirl around these things often spawn tornadoes, and the outer bands of Hurricane Dorian caused extensive damage in parts of the North Carolina coast. A lot of that damage happened this morning. This is in Brunswick County. This is where strong winds ripped through neighborhoods. This is actually Carolina Shores. Part of the houses ripped off, including the roof, the siding on some of the homes. We heard reporter Richard Devane talking about this a little bit earlier. He's in that area. Backyards littered with debris, whole fences absolutely flattened due to some of these heavy wind gusts. Now, a tornado warning was in place for Brunswick County, while some of the other nearby areas had a lot of large trees come down and a lot of other building damage, and that's certainly expected with a storm of this magnitude. One person was hurt Thursday morning when he was hit by shattered glass. This is when his windows blew out. This is why they actually tell you to tape your windows. But really, folks, this is why they actually tell you to get out. Get out of those areas if it's a mandatory evacuation. But if you are going to stay, absolutely tape the windows. And we don't know if his were taped, but his windows did blow out. He was treated at the hospital, and we're told he is now back home and is going to be doing okay. So, Fred, there was one thing I wanted to ask you. Speaking of evacuations and whatnot, you were down in eastern North Carolina this time last year for Hurricane Florence.
That's right.
Your parents live in the area. They rode out the storm last year or had to evacuate. I'm not sure which, but how are they doing this time around?
Oh, yeah. Thanks for asking. Yeah, they evacuated last year. There were mandatory evacuations in place. This year, no mandatory evacuations in place, and mom and dad are in their home. Mind you, they are 35-year residents in their house, more than 40 years in that area. So they've seen many of a hurricane come through, and they've got all their supplies and their emergency kits put together. But I've been texting back and forth.
Yes, I heard you on the phone with them earlier.
Yeah.
Now, last year you said that was like the first time in years that they actually left, and your dad didn't want to.
That was the first time ever.
Well, first time ever.
Yeah. Yeah, so it was that. Yeah, I mean, it was serious. And, I will say this, over the years, people who are used to these storms, they ride them out. They're confident, some would say overconfident, that they can handle these types of things. But even last year, seeing, the potential impact as this storm was, as Florence, I should say, was being forecast. It hit. Yeah. But the water table, the water table and the flood zones change over the years. So you see areas that flood now that didn't flood many years ago, and that changes. And it seems that with each passing year, you see areas that used to not flood. So people definitely take it more seriously.
Always better safe than sorry.
All right, well, we have a lot of pictures and video from the storm flood on our news feed.
Yeah, so let's send it over to NBC Charlotte's Rachel Lundberg. She's had a long day working since 4 a.m. this morning. Rachel, you're back tomorrow at 4 a.m., but you are tracking what we are seeing online. What's going on?
Well, when social media is like flooding our feeds, no pun intended, I have to be here because there's so much to cover. I mean, I've gotten new videos since 4 a.m. because people are just posting what they're dealing with along the Carolina coast. So we want to show you guys some of the newest video that I've just seen in the last 20 minutes or so that have been posted tonight. This is some flooding taking place in Annieville, South Carolina. I had to look up where that was at. It's just south of Myrtle Beach, but a lot of roads, they're saying that city just completely underwater, and this rushing water. So this is just between Charleston and Myrtle Beach when high tide met with the storm surge. I know we've been trying to get the picture of the frying pan. I just saw this image, guys. It's barely hanging on. Right there. That was posted just a few minutes ago, so we'll continue to monitor that. One of our NBC stations, WYFF, posted this video of a possible tornado spotted in Myrtle Beach. We've seen a lot of videos of tornadic activity in that area as we continue to monitor this storm. This guy, Wayne White, his video has been shared on a lot of the networks as he was headed to check out one of his properties and happened to spot this in North Myrtle Beach as well. A lot of flooding in those low-lying areas in Charleston as we expected that to happen. One of the videos showing earlier this morning, people were kayaking down Ashley Avenue right in downtown Charleston. So not sure what to think about that one. The sky just lighting up here in Charleston. We'll see if we can see it in just a second. Maybe not. Or maybe I just missed it. We'll see. But that was in Charleston as well. So a lot of the damage here, you can see this tree just completely uprooted. Thankfully, hopefully that house was spared. That was tweeted out by Myrtle Beach Fire Department. Then in Brunswick County, we know their city of Southport issued a noon curfew earlier today. That was in the area of where Savannah was earlier. But more damage from that picture to right here in Carolina Shores in Brunswick County from the sheriff's office. You can see a lot of damage here in the backyards of people's homes. Things just kind of tossed around in their yards there and some damage to the roof, so we'll continue to monitor it. But as far as major damage, this is the worst that I've seen. Now, not flooding related, but actually possibly tornado related. This is in Emerald Isle. I showed it to you guys earlier, but it looks like it's a trailer or RV park of some sorts and just completely damaged. We'll get a report of if anybody was injured in the coming days, I'm sure. Hopefully not. This video was pretty interesting that our newsroom shared with me. It's what happens when a tree touches a power line. I just wanted to show it again because I saw some tweets, guys, from Duke Energy, and obviously they sent thousands of linemen to the coast to help with the thousands of power outages that people are going to be experiencing for several days. And that's just a reminder that we're not supposed to be dealing with anything when it comes to power lines. So to make sure that you stay away, I know that the linemen have to stop what they're doing whenever those winds reach 39 miles per hour. So definitely our thoughts and prayers to them for them to stay safe. I know it's going to be many, many days and hours. Also, the president just tweeted a couple minutes ago that he talked to North Carolina Governor Roy Cooper ahead of Hurricane Dorian. We know it's going to be a long night ahead and that they're fully prepared to support us in any way possible. Guys, we'll send it back to you.
All right, Rachel, thank you. Now we're going to take a look at Topsail Beach. We're getting some live pictures from there. I mean, Dorian is approaching now, maybe 70 miles south, and the winds are increasing. The rain is getting heavier. You're seeing the conditions really deteriorate there. Again, this is in Topsail.
Okay, and then I think this is, what's this next one, Hatteras Island? No, this is Myrtle Beach. Yeah, Myrtle Beach. We've been showing you all types of images. Myrtle Beach obviously looking a lot different from the image we just saw. You can see the camera shaking, so there's still some residual wind, and you can see the surf there a little rough, but not nearly as rough as it was earlier when they saw winds come through. Things not as terrible as we thought they might be as this storm's track had pivoted and began to turn north and heading toward the North Carolina coast. But folks there still put on alert as things are calming down there much more than they were earlier.
Yeah, in Myrtle Beach, we did see that Jeep, too, that someone drove out to the beach and got stuck and taken up by the storm. All right, let's send it over, I believe, to Brad Panovich now with the latest track on Dorian. Brad, we've seen reporters in Myrtle Beach, Wilmington, Morehead City. When is it going to hit these areas?
Well, it's going to be heading through the Wilmington area here over the next couple hours. Just looking at the Frying Pan Tower, which there's a buoy about, I think it's about a quarter mile east of that tower. They're in the eye because the winds have begun to calm down. So we know they're in that eye wall right there. They're in the calmer areas of the center of the eye now. And it's really the Cape Fear region which is getting clobbered with the strongest winds. We'll go in closer. So you can see that the eye wall is about 45 nautical miles wide. It's pretty big compared to what it was. Remember, it was over the Bahamas, hammering them. Unfortunately, with all those Category 5 winds, it was only about 15 to 20 nautical miles wide. It was much smaller. But look at these strong bands on the north side, hammering the Cape Fear region, which includes Oak Island, Bald Head Island, then up towards Wilmington. Carolina Beach and Wrightsville Beach are right here. So you're looking at some really populated areas here getting clobbered with the worst weather right now. So, you know, this is kind of what we expected right around 8 o'clock or so. We thought we'd see the worst weather right around Wilmington, and that's what we're getting. Now, the next stop, this storm is going to continue tracking north and head up here towards Cape Lookout and the Crystal Coast, which is Morehead City Atlantic Beach area. Everybody very familiar with that. So there's where our strongest winds are right now. By tomorrow morning, 2 o'clock in the morning, it starts to move up towards Carteret County. So 2 a.m. is when things go downhill up there. And by 8 a.m., it's over, the Outer Banks. So that's kind of the timing of all this. And as we get towards lunchtime tomorrow, this starts to move away. And the backside, we'll still have some sound side flooding, but the worst weather will be gone by about lunchtime tomorrow. And then by the afternoon, it's just cleanup time for everybody. And we'll have dry conditions here in the Carolinas when we'll have several hours to kind of clean up and get prepared with sunny, dry weather. And it'll last for several days. But again, tonight it's that Cape Fear region. And Aisha Scott joins me now. And Aisha, the Wilmington area, you're very familiar with that area.
Yeah.
Getting clobbered right now, so it's a really rough night there.
Oh, yeah. And Brad, we talked a little bit earlier because I remember Hurricane Arthur went through here and I was working in Wilmington at that time, and it was 25 miles off the coast of Wilmington. So to see the same sort of image here, it reminds me so much of Arthur. Now, right now, we're dealing with some pretty heavy pockets of rain as Dorian continues to track up the coast. We've got the heavy rain moving through Wilmington at the moment. Wilmington obviously dealing with all of the tornado warnings earlier today, and the confirmed tornadoes that were also on the ground earlier today as well. And as Dorian continues off to the north, we're going to continue to see these heavy rain bands move onto the coast of North Carolina, even spreading a little bit farther inland. And then we still have some of those rain bands farther to the north, producing even thunderstorms at this point, but rain rates 2-3 inches an hour coming down in some of these bands here, moving through Belhaven, also over towards Greenville and towards Goldsboro as well. Now, let's talk about what we can expect in terms of the rain, because I actually have some friends that are watching online and they were like, when is it going to come our way? So as we go through the rest of tonight, things will really start to go downhill, especially for eastern North Carolina, New Bern, Hamilton, Nags Head, along the Outer Banks, even pushing into southeastern Virginia. We'll start to see more of the heavier rain bands move in. Notice the time frame here as we go into your Friday afternoon. So right around lunchtime, still raining along the Outer Banks in eastern North Carolina, even into southeastern Virginia at that point. And then things really start to quiet down as Dorian pushes out of here. But look at the timestamp, 10 o'clock on Friday night. So Friday night, really the storm's going to be out of here and we'll start to see things quiet down and improve big time. Now, we do have a flash flood threat to watch out for. Extreme across eastern North Carolina, obviously stretching back into Charleston as well for the rest of today. And then as we go into the day tomorrow, that flood threat will be highest along eastern North Carolina, the Outer Banks included in that, and stretching into portions of southeastern Virginia as well. Now, Dorian will start to move pretty quickly as we get into the day tomorrow. And then by the weekend, yeah, it's just cleanup time at that point. But here locally, it is going to get pretty toasty, Brad, as we work our way into the weekend.
Yeah, the heat's going to be a big story. And I wanted to show some of the winds around that Cape Fear region because we're so close to the radar. We can kind of show you the Doppler winds. We often look at these for tornadoes, but they're very useful in this type of setup. Look at some of these winds. Now, the onshore winds, 50, 60, 70 miles an hour, but just offshore, these are just off the surface. The sea is flat. It's much smoother, so you don't have the friction. When you get inland, you have big time frictional effects. Now, on the backside, these winds are going out to the sea, and you can see 70, 75 mile an hour winds about 1,000 feet off the ground. And that's the thing about tropical systems. The higher up you go, the stronger the winds are. So any kind of elevated surface like a building or a tower, I was just looking, that's Frying Pan Tower. They are in the eye. The radar confirms that. But looking at the wind speeds, they have bottomed out and the wind speeds are now dropping. So they're getting calm winds, and it'll be interesting to see the winds go back up as the other side of the eye wall approaches. Strong winds and waves, and also some tornado threats going to continue tonight. Those wind speeds, though, pretty impressive today. The strongest winds right now, right there. You see them around the Wilmington area. As we go up towards the Crystal Coast, that'll be next as we see that system move away. Now, as Aisha was talking about, very dry conditions developing behind the system. So tomorrow, I've gotten a lot of questions like, hey, can I go to the coast Friday or on Saturday? Yes, you can, because unless there's damage or the roads are blocked or they won't let you in, weather will not be the issue, because we're going to see hot, dry weather between now and really next weekend, because we're going to be well into the low and maybe even mid-90s in some locations with little chance of rain. So a good time for a lot of these locations, especially on the coast, to dry out. Here in Charlotte, we actually could have used some rain today. We ended up getting a grand total of 0, guys. No rainfall at all in Charlotte, just a breezy and cloudy day.
Unbelievable. All right. Thank you, Brad.
Well, rain and wind picking up in North Carolina, expected to get worse throughout the night. Brad talking about how Wilmington really seeing the strongest winds right now.
Yeah, NBC Charlotte's Savannah Levins is live in Wilmington this evening. Savannah, can you vouch for that?
Oh, yes, absolutely can vouch for that, Fred. I mean, the sustained winds alone are strong. Some of these gusts, though, I can barely stand up in them. Definitely seeing the impacts way more than we were earlier. You know, this afternoon, the big issue was flash flooding, and we had some reported tornadoes as well, which caused some damage in some neighborhoods. I think Rachel Lundberg was showing you some of those images earlier of one of the neighborhoods that, I mean, homes just had their entire roofs ripped off. She said she hadn't heard of any injuries, so I can confirm there were no major injuries. One man, actually, though, our NBC station here confirmed broke his wrist. The window blew out and he was thrown across the room. Thankfully, he is expected to be okay other than that broken wrist, but that was the issue earlier. This is the issue now. Obviously, this heavy deluge of rain, this strong wind. Earlier, even just with a little bit of rain, we were already seeing flash flooding, lots of roads flooding. I think we shot some video earlier. I don't know if you guys have that at all, but we had cars driving through and getting stuck. And that was just this afternoon when it was raining for maybe 2 hours. So after this kind of constant rain that we've had over the past couple hours and we'll have the next few hours, it's going to be a big concern. Thankfully, the good news is it does seem like most people from the coast really heeded the evacuation warnings. I was saying earlier that I've covered a lot of these hurricanes. I think this is my 5th hurricane major storm, and never have I seen the kind of response to that mandatory evacuation like I did this time. They wouldn't even let us back on to the beach area yesterday. They are taking this mandatory evacuation very seriously. In fact, I told you guys also earlier in this special that in Wrightsville, police are starting to criminally charge people. They had some people walking on the beach earlier today before Dorian really had major impacts here, and they ended up criminally charging them. It's a class 2 misdemeanor for not heeding that evacuation order. I've never heard of that happening, but they really took it seriously, and that is the good news, though, that it does seem like a lot of people evacuated. Lots of hotels booked up. We had shelters hitting capacity, but it sounds like everyone was able to find a spot, so that's the good news, guys. Obviously, keeping an eye on conditions here. You can probably see, I don't know if Stuart's able to kind of show the trees here, just how. Their issue is that it's so dark out right now. So you can't really see too much of the damage. Obviously, you're going to see once the sun comes up what Dorian did to this area. For now, reporting live in Wilmington, I'm Savannah Levins. I'll send it back to you.
Savannah, I know you were talking about how people evacuated, and eventually even those people who did not evacuate who faced some charges, some misdemeanor charges for not heeding the warning. How have you seen people's attitudes, or have they changed over the past 48 hours or so? I mean, I know veterans, people who are longtime residents are stubborn sometimes. Have you seen people's attitudes change as those conditions have deteriorated?
Yeah, I have. And you know, a big reason for that, I think, is Florence, honestly, or Hurricane Florence this time last year. Every single resident here I've interviewed over the past few days has said, you know what, Florence really dealt us a blow. This area specifically, the Wilmington, North Carolina coast area, Hurricane Florence really ruined a lot of people's lives here. And I think maybe up to that point, they were not as wary of hurricanes. Woo! That's what I mean about the gusts, you guys. But maybe not as wary, they just chalked it up to living on the coast. But after Florence and the effects of that, I think people took this more seriously. So maybe, in a weird way, a silver lining there.
Yeah, certainly. Thank you so much, and continue to be safe out there. We appreciate your reporting. You're doing a great job out there. Thank you. Savannah Levins reporting from Wilmington for us.
All right, now we're going to take a look at some of these pictures we're seeing on Twitter. These are from Emerald Isle. That's where our Richard Devane has been all day. And they are confirming a tornado that touched down at 9 a.m. Unbelievable pictures of destruction that you're seeing here. And of course, we know from Hurricane Dorian and those strong winds, we are seeing tornadoes and tornado warnings up and down the coast throughout those areas. Now these are winds in Charleston picking up in Dorian. We know Chris Mulcahy was stationed there for the past couple of days, but it has gone and passed through Charleston now.
And now these are pictures, I think, from the east end of Ocean Isle, and you can see there that spout just off in the corner there.
Wow.
And the water picking up on the surf. You know, this storm expected to cause, that's a water spout actually, tornadoes, which is not uncommon. And this other video of a tornado passing near Pender County, the fire station there, reporting that. And there were about 8 of these reported in several counties, and still working to confirm that number, but obviously not an out of the ordinary sighting or occurrence during hurricanes. And this, of course, was the Jeep that we were talking about that looks like someone drove. We don't know yet, but it looks like someone drove that Jeep just to see how far it could go in the water.
Yeah.
That was a bad idea.
And then police said they did abandon it, so no one was in it at this point. People saying it's about to get washed away. Obviously, we know those shots are dark. You can't see as well, but I'm sure that was taken out to sea.
And this is pictures of damage being assessed after a tornado touchdown in Emerald Isle. This is my childhood beach. This beach is about 45 minutes from where my parents live, you know, and there were lots of, like I said, tornado sightings in those areas. But this is the damage that these storms can do. The thing about hurricanes is that we see the conditions forming over the ocean, and our forecasters and our meteorologists, they track them for several days. It's a luxury of these things. But the tornadoes, they can see the signatures and what they look like on the radar, but forecasting these things long range, it's a little bit different from a hurricane. So these things catch people by surprise often.
Yeah, we know some of those shots that Richard Devane, his live shots earlier, were at a mobile home park, and one home was just completely picked up and turned upside down.
Yeah, and the good news there is that we don't know of any, or have not heard of any injuries or fatalities as a consequence of that.
All right, Brad, we're going to send it over to you with the latest on Dorian's track. As I was about to say she, is it a he or a she?
It's neither.
This was actually a discussion in the newsroom earlier, and I thought, why don't we ask this for our digital audience?
It's a good question because it's an inanimate object. It's a storm, right? It has no gender. So just because it has a female name, and if you look at the AP style guide, it tells you got to refer to them as it. Yeah, so... and you know, and it's funny, hurricanes all used to have female names. Back like when you used to name boats, they always had female names, and now we alternate male, female names. And if you ever wonder where those names come from, 3 languages: English, Spanish, and French. Those are the 3 languages spoken in the Atlantic Basin, so that's where the names come from. So sometimes you see a name and you think it's pronounced one way. It's actually the Spanish or the French version, so it can kind of throw you off. So Dorian was a replacement for Dean, which was retired. 100-mile-an-hour winds. So northeast, the 9 o'clock advisory should be in any minute now. I was just looking, and I just tweeted this out. I wish I could have grabbed it quickly. You see how the center's kind of filling in there? Doppler radar can do some amazing things. I actually am detecting birds trapped in the eye right now, believe it or not. We're getting biologicals, we call them. Sometimes bats or birds or insects show up. So there are birds trapped in the eye, and I can kind of confirm it because I've seen that signature before, but we also had a buoy down here that actually has a camera, and the center passed overhead, and the buoy camera actually caught birds flying around the buoy as the eye passed over. So that filling in is likely birds, and what they'll do is they'll seek refuge in the calm eye until they get closer to land. They're usually seabirds, and then they'll get back to the land. So kind of a fascinating thing. You see it filling in there with green. Now, I don't have the dual pole product. It's a fancy name called differential reflectivity, but that's what it is. There's likely some birds trapped in there. Here's a look at the winds going up to the northeast. Again, Outer Banks, I know a lot of my followers out there wondering about the impacts. Right around sunrise, 6, 7, 8 o'clock in the morning, worst weather in the Outer Banks, and then it improves really quickly. The good news for the Outer Banks, picks up speed, could be moving 15 or 20 miles per hour at this time. Then it's long gone, and we should be in the clear. So again, the storm is moving north, and I'm going to see if we're going to see a landfall. It's probably going to happen sometime overnight or first thing in the morning. And remember, we've had 2 landfalls with this system outside the United States, in Grand Abaco and Grand Bahama Island down in the Bahamas. We have not had an official landfall yet here in the U.S. An official landfall would mean the center or the lowest pressure passing completely over the shoreline. So we have not seen that occur yet. Heavy rain is going to continue to be a problem. Look at all these flood warnings. There's several flood warnings in effect tonight. And this is something we'll watch into the overnight because as the rain falls inland, remember, this water wants to flow back towards the ocean. But problem is the wind's blowing water up into these creeks and streams. So that's going to continue to cause some flash flooding. And right now where Savannah is, I think she's not even in the worst yet. Probably going to see the worst develop here in the next hour or so as those strong winds start to move towards the north. And just to show you those winds, this is Doppler radar looking at the wind speeds. I often show you this when we're looking at tornadoes, but in this case, look at these strong winds. Now, some of these are about 1,000 feet off the ground, but those are mixing down to the surface with the rainfall. The stronger winds are offshore, obviously, because the water's smooth and there's nothing to inhibit these speeds. You get inland, you get friction, which slows the air down. Look at all those winds, 50, 60, 70 miles an hour. And again, Frying Pan Tower, right now, I wish it was daylight. It would be amazing to see the clear skies and probably the birds flying around. But right now, the winds have gone calm in the center. Next stop, Carteret County. That's where Richard is. So Richard's going to have an active night tonight. Hope he's rested and ready to go, him and Pierre, because that storm is going to pass right over them around 2 o'clock in the morning, guys. So we could have our first U.S. landfall, officially, I should say, coming up tonight, maybe 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning.
All right, Brad, thank you very much for all your coverage. Of course, we will continue to track this throughout the evening and overnight hours.
Yeah, be sure to join us on TV after the game on NBC Charlotte.